Hello, welcome. My name is Jose Guerrero. I am a San Jose firefighter, and I've been a firefighter for coming up a couple of months. It's 26 years. I live and basically I've been raised here in San Jose. I am a very proud member of the department. I feel very lucky to be a firefighter. And today what I'm going to talk to you about is I'm going to talk about how San Jose compares to other jurisdictions. And really, we're going to use what we call by the numbers. Recently, members of the department and members of the community have asked firefighters, and including myself, about is it realistic for us to be reduced in staffing in our fire apparatus from 4 to 3, as the mayor recently stated in the State of the City address. To adequately answer the question, we would need to look at a couple of things. Number one, how does San Jose compare to other jurisdictions in the nation? How does San Jose compare to other jurisdictions in the county? Because the rest of the county, as all of you know, run 3-person staffing. And then also, is it realistic for us to deploy squads, which are the 2-person units? And then I'm going to finish up with basically looking at a community. And the community that we focus on is the Willow Glen community. So to answer the question whether we can realistically reduce staffing or what are the impacts of reduction in staffing from 4 to 3, let's take a look at 2 items. Number one, the U.S. Census of 2009. This was released in the spring of 2011, but if you look at the screen, you can see that this was conducted by the U.S. Census and based on the population of 2009. And what they did was they looked at the survey of the top 40 departments in the nation and how they ranked in their staffing. So we're going to look at firefighter staffing per 1,000 in population. And this may be a little bit difficult for you to see on the screen, but if you look at the red arrow on the bottom, it identifies that San Jose is number 40 of the top 40 in staffing. So I'm going to zoom in on the next slide. The next slide, we're looking at the top 5 departments and also at the bottom 6 departments. If you look at the top, this is how you would read this. You would read it in that firefighters per 1,000 in residents, the city of Washington, D.C. has 273 residents for 1 firefighter. Memphis has 366 residents for 1 firefighter. So basically what they did was they took the population, they divided that by the number of sworn personnel, and you get a ratio. The ratio for Washington, D.C. is 3.67. Let's take a look at San Jose. San Jose ranks number 40. We are 1,800 residents for 1 firefighter. We are not even on the 3.0, 2.0 per ratio. We're at 0.55. That is as of 2009 rankings, and we know that we eliminated Engine 30, Engine 33, Engine 34, Engine 35, Truck 3, Hit 29, and then also brown out 2 other companies. I think at that time was Engine 9 and 29. So I know that our ratios are significantly less than the 0.55. It's important to remember that these numbers don't come from any bias source other than the U.S. Census in 2009. Another source that we're using to compare how San Jose fire staffing compares is the California Department of Finance. They conducted a survey. And this survey is on your screen. You can see at the very bottom how San Jose is 0.598. And I'm going to zoom in on both of those right now. The top screen has San Jose from the U.S. Census, it ranks number 40. The bottom one is the California Department of Finance. It has 0.598. Independent sources, the California Department of Finance, the U.S. Census, basically has our staffing levels at a ratio of 0.55 or 0.598. We are very low. Now, although we're the 10th largest city in the country, our staffing level reflects that of the 40th largest city, basically. If you look at the population that we serve, if we say, well, we want to bring, the mayor may say that he wants to bring our staffing levels to what the rest of the county does, I think that we're different. And let me tell you why. Let's take a look at the population that we serve. we serve a population of just over 1 million people. The second closest department has a population of about 1/5 the size. And if you look at number 5, Palo Alto, Mountain View, Milpitas is basically one of our stations first due area. Take a look at the population of 76,000, 75,000, 70,000. Later, we're going to look at the population in focus, which is the Willow Glen area. It's almost one of our battalions, the city of Mountain View and the city of Palo Alto and so on. If you look at the population density, so we take the population divided by the square miles that we serve. We all know that we serve about 205 square miles in San Jose. That if you look at it, we're basically in the middle. We have about 5,000 residents for every square mile. So we're not low, we're not high, we're kind of in the middle. But nonetheless, our staffing ratio is way low compared to other departments. Look at our stations, how far apart are our stations. So if you take a look, for example, the city of Santa Clara. City of Santa Clara covers approximately 20 square miles. They have 10 fire stations. That means that their average miles per station coverage is almost 2 miles per station. So every 2 miles, there's another fire station throughout the city. If we look at the city of Mountain View, it's about 2.4 to almost 2.5 miles, there's a station. That is what the rest of the county is running, and they're running that with 3-person. If you look at the city of San Jose Fire Department, we're just over 6 miles apart. That is the average distance between stations. So if you are going to travel to your outer edges or your first due area, other departments basically pass up 2 other stations to get to the 3rd station first due area, where that is part of our first due area. We basically have a larger area that we cover with a significantly less staffing levels. It is one of the hurdles and why it's very difficult for us to simply reduce our staffing from 4 to 3. This is a map of the City of San Jose Fire Department and also the council districts. I'm going to focus on the Willow Glen area. On your screen, you can see how Willow Glen community is Station 6, and it also happens to be the District 6, just by chance. But Station 6 is on your screen. The first due area is basically the circle, which is the 6-mile radius that is the average response area for every fire company. The only exception is that we know that in the downtown area, the fire stations are closer together. And as you immediately leave the downtown area, so now we're in the Willow Glen area or Station 26 on Tully Road, now the distance significantly increase in first due areas, but the average again is 6. You can see how far apart the second due engine is from Station 9. So the Hillsdale Fire Station, Hillsdale and Ross, would be responding into the Willow Glen area. You can see what the response times would look like, especially when you have obstacles such as time of day, your traffic, and also availability of those units. If the fire comes in between Willow Glen area and the Pearl and Branham area, then the next station would be Station 13 in Pearl and Branham. You can see the distance that they have to cover. They're over 6 miles apart. So your second due fire engine is farther away compared to other jurisdictions. If you see the blue, Station 30 has no engine, there's no water, that's why it's colored blue. That means that if there's a fire that were to occur, let's say, across the street from Station 30, the firefighters that are there is a truck company and a squad. There is no hose, no water, no pump in that station. As a reduction in resources, as a cost-saving measure, the fire engine at Station 30 is eliminated. So if you were going to have a fire across the street from Station 30, the water to extinguish that fire would come from the Willow Glen station. So you can see an arrow moving firefighters into Willow Glen area. If that were to happen and another medical emergency or a fire emergency were to occur in Willow Glen area, then you could see how units from the Hillsdale station, number 9, number 13 from Pearl and Branham or Tully Road would need to travel into the Willow Glen area. So basically what we're talking about is response times. You now have a visual of why is it that firefighters have a difficult time meeting response times. Our fire stations are too far apart, and with traffic and distance of locations of fire stations, we definitely are not meeting the response times. If you look at the downtown district, council district number 3, and take a look at how many fire stations are in the downtown area. You have basically stations 7, 1, and 30, 8, and 3. That council member has about 5 fire stations in their council district. So if you're going to reduce staffing or propose that you're going to reduce staffing from 4 people on an apparatus down to 3, I guess it would be a lot more palatable when you have 5 fire companies in your district compared to the Willow Glen council member that says, well, I only have 1 in that 6-mile radius, and I'm going to now, it'd be a good idea to reduce our staffing from 4 in an apparatus down to 3. You could see that what an impact it would have on that community. But the Willow Glen community is no different than if this were to happen to the Tully Road community at Station 26 or the Pearl and Branham community. The firefighters that we have are doing more with less and having a difficult time responding and making their response times. If we're going to compare apples and apples, if you're going to say, well, the rest of the county, City of Santa Clara, Mountain View, Milpitas, everyone runs 3-person engine companies. If we're going to compare, then we would have to have additional stations built. If we're going to be like the City of Santa Clara and say, we're going to have a fire station every 2 miles, we would need to build an additional 73 fire stations in order to be like the rest of the county, to be like City of Santa Clara. City of Mountain View, we would need to build an additional 52 fire stations, which is completely cost prohibitive, especially in this tough budgetary times. I don't believe that the answer is to simply reduce without building an additional number of stations. If you're talking about comparing apples and apples, 3-person staffing, I think we also need to look at the distance between fire stations, and then number 2, at being like the rest of the county, adding a significantly number of stations more. I took this from the Urban Planning Area Strategies, which is a document from the City of San Jose. 2 things I'd like you to take a look at. The population that Willow Glen engine serves, and number 2, the square miles that it serves. You can see on the screen that the 75,000 population, according to a document from the city, and that they serve about 10 square miles. Take a look at what Mountain View does with 71,000 residents and 12 square miles. On the screen, you can see that they provide basically the same population. They provide service for the same population, almost the same square miles in Willow Glen, but the City of Mountain View does it with 5 engine companies, 1 truck company, 1 ladder, 1 rescue squad, and also a hazmat team. I think on the screen you can see it says 86 total personnel that are sworn. So they're actually truly, public safety is their number 1 priority, and you can see it from the amount of funds that are being allocated towards the fire department just to have that level of staffing. In the Willow Glen community, just an example, is they're doing that with 1 fire apparatus, 4 people, and the discussion is to reduce it to 3 people. Another department would be the City of Santa Clara. On the City of Santa Clara, you can see how on the bottom screen it says 19.3 square miles. And the population, you can see that basically they have almost 20 square miles. You can see that they have 10 fire stations, a fire station every 2 miles. That is difficult to compare and to simply say we're going to reduce staffing in the Willow Glen or any one of our fire stations to 3 because we serve an equal amount of population or sometimes even bigger, and our fire stations are farther apart. If, looking back at the Willow Glen station, you have 1 fire company there, 1 engine. If we're going to be reducing staffing down to 3, basically this is what it would look like. Every 2.5 miles or so, there would be a fire station. So we would be talking about having 5 fire stations in the Willow Glen area. But unfortunately today is being covered by one. If we're going to say, well, how many stations do we have today? And there's a map of the city of San Jose and the location of every station. And if we are going to say, well, let's add an average number of fire stations that the rest of the county has, because they run 3. Take a look at the top right-hand screen. We would need to add an additional 31 new fire stations to be running 3-person companies. So you can see the asterisks of the location of the new stations in order to be able to deploy 3-person staffing. With this, an additional difficulty or problem that we have is meeting the federal law of OSHA 2 in, 2 out. All of you firefighters know what this is, but what it does is, in an attempt to reduce the number of injuries and fatality rate nationwide, federal OSHA has required that anytime an employee, a firefighter, gets introduced, what we call that an IDLH atmosphere, so an atmosphere that is immediately dangerous to life and health. Basically, they're being, as part of their work, introduced into that environment, that a house is on fire, there were heat, smoke, or flame, that they must be accompanied by a second person, a second firefighter. That second firefighter must be in voice and or visual contact, not enough to just simply say, well, you're going to go in by yourself and if you need something, I'll be on the radio outside. That cannot happen. That would be a violation of the 2 in, 2 out. That the 2 people are working in what we call the buddy system whenever you enter an IDLH atmosphere. And that in addition to that, there would be 2 more people standing by outside to monitor those people in the building, to initiate rescue if needed, or call for additional backup. That federal law, 2 in, 2 out, the intent is to make sure that you have a long, healthy career in the fire department, that it would reduce injury rate by making sure that we all work in a buddy system whenever you enter a dangerous environment. If we were going to reduce staffing from 4 to 3, we would definitely not be able to go inside to conduct search, to extinguish the fire, to locate the fire, and basically begin our firefighting efforts. Some people sometimes say, well, we will now be as good as our second due company. If you remember how long it takes for a second due company to travel from a farther distance, more than 6 miles away, then once the second due company that comes from farther away, they arrive on scene, the firefighter gets off the rig, puts their breathing apparatus, their safety gear on, dons their self-contained breathing apparatus, then they would have a buddy system and they would be able to enter. The fear from firefighters and the concern is that the fire would grow in size from the room of origin to basically to the structure of origin. So we would be faced with a more dangerous progress in fire, and the damage and damage to the property, survivability of the occupants would be dramatically reduced. We know that most of the time we find occupants that are fire fatalities or they're injured as a result of the fire, we find them on the way out, meaning that the means of egress. So we find them on the hallway as they're trying to get out through the front door or the sliding door in the backyard. That's the means of egress where we find victims. Unfortunately, if we were to reduce from 4 to 3 and our fire stations are so far apart, we would definitely expect that injury rate and casualty of the civilians would dramatically increase. Our fatality rate is something that we also are concerned with the civilians and with the firefighter fatalities. It's difficult to see on the screen, but at the very bottom, you can see how California has the highest civilian fire deaths as of 2006, and that's the simple number that we're able to just pull up. But we have a high number of fatality rate. We also have nationwide a very high fatality rate for firefighters. About 100 firefighters die a year, a combination of volunteer and career. In essence, it is a dangerous environment being on the fire ground. responding to and returning from incidents at all hours of day and night. Sometimes people have asked, well, why is it that you need 4 people on a company for a very minor medical call? Well, let me first explain what the roles are for every person on the company. We currently have 4 people on the company. We have a captain, which is a company officer, the person in charge. We have 2 firefighters, one of which is a paramedic, and we have a driver. So let me just run a scenario and explain to you what each one of us does. I'll start with the captain. When we arrive on scene with a 4-person staff, the captain is in charge of scene management. A lot of times it is the worst thing that has happened to the family members. Let's say that grandmother has fallen down, that people are very emotional. It's an emotionally charged situation. So it's important for us to be able to communicate with the victim and with the best historian what happened prior to the incident. So normally the company officer will take the family out of the room and have the closest or the person that can provide the most history, what happened just prior to the incident, provide information. They normally, you'll find them on the doorway to the room where we are. Inside the room, you will find 2 firefighters. One of them, which is a patient person. Let's say that the paramedic is the person who is in charge of the patient. That's the rules that we have, is that that's the only person that will ask questions. So the paramedic will ask what happened, conduct the evaluation, and find any hidden injuries. The firefighter, the EMT, will now begin to administer oxygen, take vital signs, respirations, blood pressure, skin signs, and call them out loud as the company officer begins to write down on a worksheet all the findings. In addition to that, for any chest pain situation, that firefighter would be putting in the EKG electrodes, or up to and including a 12-lead EKG. That things that used to happen in the emergency room have now been rolled out to the fire department, and we're now being able to capture issues while they're arising and being able to identify them and many times correct them on scene. So there's work for each person on the scene. The driver not only drives, as we call that person, the fire engineer, drives, positions the rigs, comes inside, and it basically becomes a gopher. The gopher is if we need to bring a backboard, cervical spine. If there's a fracture, we ask the person to bring in the frac kit, additional trauma bags, additional equipment that we may need. So this person runs back to the apparatus. It's difficult for us as firefighters to bring everything that we need because we bring what is reasonable. If we need additional equipment, that's the person that goes back and gets it. Sometimes we're having to arrive on scene on an apartment complex, and some of you may know that it's very difficult, especially maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning. Visibility is diminished just to find a specific address. So sometimes we'll tell the fire engineer, please go down and wave in and bring in the ambulance so we can transport the patient in a most expedient manner. So there's a role for each person. There's a division of labor, and everybody works together. Can we reduce and eliminate one of those positions? You can always do more with less. I am, with 26 years in the fire department, I find it difficult to really say that we do more with less. In reality, we do less with less. Some of the people on scene would need to start do some type of level of dual rolling, and some things would need to be delayed or really just wait until someone else completes them. So that is how the importance, I think, that if a family member of mine or someone that I care about needs medical help, that I would like to have the efficiency of 4-person staffing. And here, I'm not going to go through each one of them. You can read those on your own. But basically, it just tells you that 4-person crews, the treatment happens faster, especially for cardiac patient, when you have 4-person versus 3. And basically, it tells you the benefits of having a 4-person crew whenever you have to intubate, which is placing a tube down somebody's trachea so they can breathe adequately whenever they're not breathing. So when you have some advanced life support care, it definitely I think we say that many hands make light work, especially when time is of the essence. When someone's not breathing, when we're conducting CPR, that is essential for us to have the 4-person staffing. Which brings me to the next point. Why is it that we have 4 people showing up on a on a medical incident where the injury may be very minimal? Well, I think that we're as good in regards to the dispatchers, in regards to the units responding, we're as good as a historian. So whoever calls 911 and provides us a picture, sometimes a person calls in and says they're having a heart attack, and it turns out to not be a heart attack. It may be hyperventilation, something that may be treated, but it doesn't rise to the severity of a heart attack where someone could potentially die as a result of having this incident. So I think that it is important to recognize that in some type of calls that are not life-threatening, that we may be able to respond to those calls with a 2-person squad. It is not unreasonable to say that. I think it is, but we need data. Unfortunately, with the Measure B, as it has been brought forward, the changes to the disability as part of Measure B, the reduction in salary, the increase the decrease in compensation or take-home pay has dramatically changed the environment where employees have now left, and we have not, in the fire department at least, have had difficulty putting out valid data and valid numbers. We need to make sure that we run good numbers to have good data to identify when a 2-person squad would be needed, when they would respond, because I am of the belief that there is room for a 2-person squad units. In essence, here's what we're looking at. As firefighters, we have concern that we have very low staffing. Number 2, our fire resources are down. We don't have enough units to do the mission, to conduct the mission that the fire department is in charge of. I don't believe that we're being given the tools that we need in order to be successful to meet the response times. Our response times are down. As firefighters, we care for the community. We want to do the right thing, but we have great difficulty because of our staffing and our resources are down. And most recently with Measure B passing, that recruitment has been difficult, but really I think on the long-term impact, retention, and that is very obvious with the police department. They have the ability to move from one department to another because they have a certificate, which is called a post certificate, which is like the cost of being trained. Basically, what happens is on the police department, employees come on to the police department, they get trained, they get their certificate, and then they move on to another department where the compensation is more competitive, where the benefits are more competitive, especially they don't have the negative parts of the disability portion of Measure B. In the fire department, I don't think we will have a difficulty recruiting, although I don't think that quality candidates will be coming here or have been coming here because of the changes in Measure B. And number 2, we've already started seeing, not to the numbers that San Jose Police Department has seen, but the retention is and will continue to be a difficult issue for us. In conclusion, I told you a little bit about how San Jose firefighters compare by using the U.S. Census and also the California Department of Finance. I explained the difference between a 4-person and the difficulties that we have by reducing down from 4 to 3 in our staffing, because especially our location, the station locations were too far apart. And then I also explained to you that I think that there is room for a 2-person squads. I mean, LA County has had them since the mid-70s, so for the low-level type calls, I think absolutely there is room for improvement for us to have a 2-person squad where we can make more efficient use of the 4-person staffing. And then the community in focus that we utilized was the Willow Glen community. In the future, we are going to be doing this same presentation, but in other communities, because I think it's important that there's awareness from the public about the facts, by the numbers, basically, on how the fire department is functioned and how firefighters view the changes that the council members and the politicians are pitching to the community. If you have any questions, feel free to approach any San Jose firefighter. They do have the facts, or it's important for us to hear from you. We have on your screen, you can see our local 230 email address. Feel free to visit our website and post any questions you may have. Thank you.
If you'd like a presentation on how fire department staffing reductions have affected your neighborhood, contact us, info@sanjosebythenumbers.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter for news and updates and access to all of our community presentations.